Well, hello again and welcome back. Today on the podcast, we are doing part two of the pre-sale episode that we launched last week. And Sarah, you got even more gold in store for us this week.
Yes. So if you listened to the podcast last week, I gave you the first half of this pre-selling, pre-sold list. And we're going to review it real quickly, and then I'll go into the second half. And just as a little bit of a refresher, everything that I'm sharing in both this podcast and the last podcast is pre-work on the Powerful Proposals webinar that we're going to be hosting in July of 2024. The exact date and time has not been released yet. We're still working on the tangibles for that workshop. And when we get a little bit further along in that process, we will have better understanding of when we can host that workshop. But as we're preparing, all of these bullet points came up. And so I said, why not share them on the podcast so that people can familiarize themselves with these concepts so that when we do launch Powerful Proposals, it makes sense as to one, why they should attend, and two, they come into the webinar with all the necessary information to then take action upon their proposals system. And so just real quick, some of the things that we talked about in the last podcast that are important to the proposal stage. The first is confidence. And there's no understating the importance of this one. I put it first for a reason. And this comes up all the time. It came up 35 minutes ago when I was having the Q&A call with the Academy members. Someone had done all the work of figuring out what they wanted to offer, pricing their offer so that it was profitable. They got a lead that was hot, and they were hesitant to press send on the proposal because they didn't have confidence in the rates. They're like, it seems so high. I'm afraid they're going to say it's too expensive. Even though they did the math and they know that what they're charging is what they need to charge in order to make this business actually a business, they still lacked the confidence. And so there's no understating how important confidence is. So that's the first thing that we talked about. Second thing we talked about is when you are messaging your business, your services, your offer, communicate the value, not the cost. And we go deeper in that in the first episode. We then talk about the use of imagery and design, which is the language of our senses. And our senses are directly hardwired into our brain to incentivize action, whether that's go closer to a thing or run from a thing. So the importance of using imagery and design in your marketing. We also talked about the psychology of people wanting to be seen, not sold to. And then lastly, we talked about social proof and its importance in the pre-selling process. Nobody wants to be the first to invest in a thing, and the importance of social proof in making people feel safe and more trusting of a brand, and thus willing to spend lots of money. So the first thing on the list that we're going to talk about today is something that I'm calling future casting, or the setting of expectations. There's two ways that we do this in the pre-sale process. The first, in the setting of expectations, is literally this is what you can expect after you sign and pay. And you can see that reflected in a lot of people's websites or in their email sequences where it says, you've decided to book with us. What happens next? And it's like step one, this, and step two, we do this, and step three, and then we have a happy event, etc. That helps people pace the expectations as to, okay, if I sign and pay, what's next? People feel safer when they are not staring into a void. And so by kind of giving them or suggesting that the future has this in store for you, makes people feel more confident in moving forward because they can see the road ahead. So there's that. And I literally see that as like you're throwing something in front. It's like a hologram in my head. That's how I see it. When you're forecasting for someone, you're almost like playing a fictitious trailer for what life will be like after you say yes to this. And we really do want to try and paint a visual picture of this is the version of you that said yes to this investment, and this is how it feels and how it looks, and aren't you so excited? An example that comes to mind here, if anyone has ever sat through a timeshare proposal meeting wherein they're like, we'll give you 2 nights stay at some resort. All you need to do is attend this 90-minute presentation. And like the close rate of people walking out of there having signed for a timeshare is ridiculously high. So high, in fact, that they had to pass laws in many states that said you have 3 days to back out of whatever contract that they made you sign, which prior to these laws being passed, you were basically walking out of there in a daze and you were so excited and you sign away for thousands of dollars. And then you grab some dinner, have some sleep, you wake up the next morning, you're like, what did I just do? And like, we want to do a little of that. We want to do a little bit of this is the version of you that said yes to this experience. And you can almost see your guests sipping on these delicious cocktails and raving about what a great decision it was to have this event. That's a little bit of what we want to do in the pre-sale process is help them envision what their life will be like, what their event will be like, what people will think of them, how people will respond to them agreeing to having you at their event.
In hypnotherapy, there's a method called the yes set. And we use this in marketing to convert leads. The yes set is basically if you can get someone to agree with you 3 times in the beginning of a conversation, they're more likely to continue to agree with you. In fact, like when I say more likely, I mean like 99% more likely to it works on toddlers as well. So the yes set in marketing looks like in all of your marketing materials and all of your proposals, brochures, social media posts, everything that you put out into the world, you're assuming that person is a yes. And so instead of saying, if you want to book with us, click here, we say, when you book with us, this is what you'll experience. And so I just assumed that you're already going to book. I think it's called presumptive language in marketing. The assumption is that they are absolutely sold. They're totally interested. And what you're doing is on a subconscious level, you're future pacing. You're having them agree with you in small ways that they may not notice so that when it comes to the big end result, when they sign that contract, they're more likely to agree because they've already agreed with you in such small ways in the beginning.
Yes. This also happens with money. And we didn't talk about that in the first episode because it will be a smaller portion of the proposal workshop. But when people spend a little bit of money with you, they are much more likely to spend more money with you, which is why, and we'll talk about this again in the workshop, we teach that you should, at the initial onset, sell them a base package, not all the bells and whistles, because we want them to spend a little bit of money now. And then we can do upsells and add-ons later on down the road. And they've already spent money with you. They already feel good about that investment. And so it's much easier to get them to make those upsells and add-ons later on. But yes, to utilizing small opportunities for them to agree with you or say yes to something. And that can look simply like you enjoy a good cocktail. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Yes, I do. I absolutely love a good cocktail. You've been to events with boring wedding bars. Yes, I have. I have been to events with boring wedding bars, right? And so just framing things so that they're like, she gets me. Again, we want people to relate to our messaging and we want them to feel seen in our messaging. And all of those little opportunities that you take during that pre-sale process for them to be like, yes, I agree with you, that builds intimacy, which is one of our main goals with this.
And compliments work really well as well because you can feed in compliments there. You say, you have great tastes. That's why you're here. And so anytime you can compliment them, you can say, you're too intelligent or you're too.
You recognize that your mobile bar experience is too important to leave to the unexperienced or to the black tablecloth and the 6-foot table.
Exactly that. Because then people are like, oh, I do. You're right. I am better than that. Right. And so then you like had them agree with you and also made them feel really good about themselves. And like that's a double whammy in psychology.
It absolutely is. And that's actually number 2 here. So you and I have seamlessly slipped into the second thing we're going to talk about today. And that is people do business with people. And our goal always in marketing is to build intimacy. And we build intimacy by being relatable. We build intimacy by allowing them to feel seen. We build intimacy by being a business, a person that people want to be friends with, they want to hang out with, they want to wear our brand. If you're ever someone who's fangirling on another company, they have done a really good job of building intimacy with you. They don't know you and you don't know them, but you feel like you do, and you just love everything they stand for. And so you become an advocate, you become a raving fan, all of these kind of buzzwords. That's only possible when someone builds intimacy. And you build intimacy by identifying the things that are important to you as a company. And then you draw in the people that also believe that those things are important to them. And it's so much easier to get them to buy from you when you've kind of collectively agreed, yeah, we both value the same things. And I like your tone. I like the imagery that you utilize. I like the fonts and the colors and all the necessary bits and pieces, because you can't be in the room with them all the time, but you can feel like you're in the room with them because you have this representation through either your website or your social media or the proposal that's in their inbox that encompasses and really makes them feel like they understand and recognize what you're about, who you're for, and that they're one of those people that you're for.
One of the things that you teach often is that people love themselves most. Like, of all the people that they love themselves most. And if you're listening and you're being honest with yourself, like you more than you like most of your friends, if not all of them, right? And so people want to see themselves represented in your marketing. And they can only do that if you're being intimate, if you're being personal, if you're not vulnerable to like a messy degree, but vulnerable in a way that has purpose and calls on the future version of your client, that calls on the version of them that's excited for this experience, that wants the fairy tale wedding or the boho wedding or the elevated corporate event, right? And so being intimate is a lot about finding out who you are so that you can put that into your messaging. And then your people, because you're a real person and you're showing your real personality, people can see themselves reflected in you. And if they like those qualities about themselves, they're automatically going to like those qualities about you.
Amen to that. And we've talked about this a number of different times, especially around things like if you're turning nobody off, you're turning nobody on, right? The buzzword of be authentic. That's what we're talking about. You don't want to be beige. If you're beige, which is a color everyone's neutral about, and that's why they paint like every house that I've ever lived in, I've had to repaint because it's always beige when we move in. Like the government is beige. Nobody wants that. So we have to be vibrant, and not everyone's going to like your color, but the people who like your color are going to love that color.
The government is beige is my favorite quote from every podcast you've ever done.
Ah. Okay. So build intimacy whenever possible. And you can do that in large and small ways by just showing up as yourself and showing up consistently as yourself. And also caring about the people that you're working with or the people that you want to work with. And you care by solving the problems that they want solved, by offering things that are attractive to that particular ideal client, by speaking in a way that they want to be spoken to, all the things, right? The next thing that is important for you to do during the pre-sale process is to invite them to take action. This is something I think a lot of people overlook. They wait until they are at the brochure or the proposal stage to make the ask. And it doesn't necessarily have to be overt, like book now, but it can be, if this sounds attractive to you, here's how we move forward. If you'd like to have a mobile bar experience at your event, reach out the following ways. If you have additional questions about what this could look like, call us here. It doesn't have to be aggressive. And I've seen this too many times where it's like, okay, I like what you have going on. Where do I find you? And there's maybe like not a link in the Instagram bio, or maybe there is a website that makes it really hard for me to find where to click to get more information. Like, yes, this is your homepage, and like, where's the contact us form, right? So if you've ever gotten a website review from me, if you're in one of the group programs, I'm always like buttons everywhere, like, inquire here, contact us, like more buttons. We want to make it easy for people to figure out how to get to that next step with you. So clarifying throughout the entire buying process or the entire pre-selling process, how to move forward in this relationship is really important.
And in call to action, I would imagine it actually just dawned on me while you were talking, but I would imagine it works a lot like money and the yes set. Like if they pay you a little bit, they're more likely to pay you a lot. And like with a call to action, if they're not like hot and ready to go, ready to buy, maybe you give them smaller opportunities to say yes or to take action with you, which could look like download our FAQ sheet or join our newsletter or follow us on Instagram. Those are low pressure calls to action that don't require me to spend thousands of dollars, but do create intimacy, do answer my questions, and do keep me in your ecosphere. And so you want to have like small time call to action buttons for people who are maybe warm leads, who maybe they just now heard of a mobile bar for the first time ever. You know what I mean? And so having the big call to action, again, not aggressive, but then also having opportunities for them to take micro actions that build that trust in that relationship.
Absolutely. The other thing that's really powerful here is asking questions, because asking questions encourages engagement. It encourages them to respond in whatever way it would be. So if you're writing an email, we learned this from Alan Berg, that you should end every email with a question. And you end every email with a question because it gives them the opportunity to respond. And now we're building intimacy, we're building a two-way communication set, right? But we can also do that in social media. For a long time, that was the thing, is you should always end a post with a question or some way for them to react or respond. I feel like that's kind of fallen out of favor because people are like, I get it. We know that trick now, which is, fine. The way we communicate socially evolves over time. What does remain consistent is that it should be about building intimacy. And so now it's like, comment brew in the comments and I'll, slip into your DMs. That's another opportunity for us to build intimacy. So make the ask and give them opportunities to take micro actions or say mini yeses before we present them with the invitation to make the big yes. The next thing that we want to talk about here is automations. And we live in the year of our Lord, 2024, that is about 2 years post the release of AI on the world, which is the epitome of automations. There's so much that you can do with AI these days. And as a result, I have fallen out of love with the process of automating all the things. It's not that I don't believe that some things should be automated. Some things should absolutely be automated. What I believe is we shouldn't automate everything. And so what I want to kind of talk about a little bit on today's podcast is what I think you should automate and what I think you should not automate, and then maybe a little bit behind the why. One thing that I absolutely think you should automate, because it's expected that you automate it, is when someone drops into your lead funnel, that they get an instantaneous reply with valuable information. Not just a thank you for your inquiry. We will send you more information in 24 to 48 hours. Because when they send you an inquiry form, they've taken a small action. They've said a small yes. And we want to reward them for that with more than a thanks for being here. That's the bare minimum. That's the floor. And we're not about the floor over here. We want to take that to the next level. And so they get the automated response. What else? What value are we providing for them?
Maybe that could be like here's our 3 favorite summer cocktails, and you just rotate that every season for your city, right? And so here's our 3 favorite fall cocktails. Or the biggest thing about automation is that it's not a set it and forget it. It has to be living, because as your business grows or as the seasons change, you may want to update that with something that feels more personalized. So at Christmas time, if I'm still getting your automation about your favorite cocktails and it was general, that's not super valuable. I can find that on Google. But if it's your favorite Christmas cocktails, well, now I feel like we're in real time together. That's fitting. It feels like winter outside. Warm cocktails to warm your soul or something sweet like that, you know? And so you can offer tons of different things in that initial meetup. What are some of the things that you've seen in that initial response that people respond really well to?
My favorite above all is a personal introduction. So you can, after the submission of the inquiry form, you can reroute them to a hidden page on your website that has a video of you talking about your business, who you are, what you do, how you serve, what makes you different. Even if they don't watch the full video or any of the video, the very fact that they inquired with your business and the next thing they see is your smiling face. Yes, all the yeses. The brain is like literally wired to love smiling faces. And so they're left immediately with a positive reaction to the decision that they just made. So even if they don't press play, if the preview of the video on that website is you looking excited to have them there winning. And then if you add more value by making them feel good about their decision, by saying you've obviously got great tastes in event bars because you're here, and because you're here, here's a few things that I know are important to you. It doesn't matter what you say after that, they're going to feel seen and you've built a small amount of intimacy. Other things that you could do include sending facts page. We know that if you're at this stage of planning your event, you probably have some questions. Thank you. I do have questions, not the least of which is like, what is this going to cost me? But there's probably a number of other questions that I have too. What does this look like? What offerings do you have? So this would be a good place for a brochure, not a proposal, but a brochure. Anything that you can do to enrich their experience, get them to know you a little bit deeper and intimately, and leave them with a great taste in their mouth is perfect for this particular stage in an automation. The second thing that I recommend automating is the follow-up after you have sent a proposal. And that's just common sense in the fact that we know that you're probably not going to sit down at your computer every single day and be like, 2 days ago, I sent this, I'm going to send this email. Oh, I already sent that email. In 2 days, I'm going to send this email, right? We're busy entrepreneurs and we really should be automating things that need to happen, but really aren't a good use of our time. And follow-up sequences, and we teach this at length in the academy and also in the accelerator. What should that follow-up sequence include? How should we be communicating our value in those follow-up sequences? All of those things. But follow-up sequence should be automated. There are a number of ways to do this. So many softwares that do this. Obviously, the CRMs are going to have this functionality. There are even a lot of newsletter systems. We use ActiveCampaign that's really good for this. Flowdesk is pretty good for this too. Any newsletter campaign is really going to have the option to offer this functionality for you. So that's something that should be automated. One thing that should not be automated in the year of 2024, from my perspective, is the proposal. The sending of the proposal. Now, once upon a time, Honeybook, Dubsado, all the CRMs released the functionality to send people things where they could then make their own selections, and then it would build an invoice and they could sign and pay. I'm a big believer, having done this for as many years as I have and worked with as many people as I have, that yes, some people will go through that process and you will book. You're leaving a lot of money on the table if you're doing it that way, because people don't know what they want or need. And if that's what you're doing and you're just sending them a brochure setup where it's like, click all the things in order to put together your ideal package, and then boom, there we go, you're going to lose people. And so do not, in my opinion, automate the proposal or the creation of the proposal.
I want to highlight the piece there where you said people don't know what they want. And this is where you have to put your mind in the seat of the client, because potentially this bride just found you on Pinterest and she's never seen a mobile bar before. Potentially this corporate HR representative is like, what fun thing can we do this year that we've never done? And they've never heard of mobile bars, so like that's unique. And then they come to you. And then if you have that set up to where it's like, okay, select all the things. How many cups do you need? Napkins do you need? How many cocktails do you want? This person has like analysis paralysis, and a confused mind will not buy. And so when you're saying like building a custom proposal, for one, it creates intimacy because I know that my event has been seen by you. You're the expert and you've created something for me. Two, I'm not overwhelmed and overloaded. And so you live in your business. You know that you need cups, napkins, forks, spoons, people behind the bar. Like, I know. For those of you who can't see, Sarah shaking her head because you don't need forks or spoons, but you guys get what I mean. You have a very good idea of what's needed because you live in this business. And when you move into the seat of your client, they may have no idea. You're not talking to other mobile bar experts, right? And that might seem like, duh, Dawn, that's super obvious. But I can tell you in all my years of retail, I watched a million hairdressers do this, where they talk to their clients, like their clients know what a level 6 is. They have no idea what a level 6 is. You know what I mean? They need a swatch book is what they need. And so slowing the mind down and putting yourself in the seat of the client and giving superfluous details is so important. And so I can see why building custom proposals is a game changer on both ends.
There's a fine line that we balance here. And I think we oftentimes err on the side of too much. And that's because clients want the illusion of control. And we, as mobile bar owners in the premium space, want to give bespoke options. We can be catered and custom. I literally had someone come through Leadwise the other day, and they're like, we want to be universally appropriate for any event, anywhere, with any drinks. That was essentially what they were getting at. That was the ask. They're like, I want you to teach us how to be ubiquitous and flexible so that we can do any event with any drink. And like, I recoil immediately. I'm like, oh, why would you want to do that? Because that's too many options, right? And so we want to give people the illusion of control. And we do that by curating options. And I'll give you a little example as to what this can look like. And this isn't a mobile bar example, but I like giving examples from outside the mobile bar space because I think it helps round out what I'm trying to say. So we're getting our backyard hardscaped, which for anybody who doesn't know what hardscaping is, it's no greenery. We're going to put plants and stuff out there, so it'll be beautiful, but we want some stones out there to make it so that it's not so muddy and that sort of thing. Anyways, the dude comes out and he's like, all right, it's time to pick what rocks you want. And I'm like, okay. And he sent me a website, and then there were so many rocks. I'm like, how could I ever pick from these rocks? Now, what he didn't do very well, because he's a small business owner who doesn't listen to my podcast, obviously, is that he didn't do a good job of letting me know that there are only some rocks that are appropriate for this job. So he just sent me a website with all the rocks. And so now I'm like, okay, that's a lot of rocks. And so how about this one? This one looks good. And then he was like, oh no, not that one. That's not a very good rock for this project. And I'm like, okay, how about this? How about you narrow this down for me, given that you have 8-10 years of experience putting rocks in people's backyards? Which one, given what you know about my desires for this backyard, do you think would be best? And he gave me 4 options, which was fine. It was fine. But then there were color options on top of that. And so by the end of this 45-minute session, I literally was just like, I don't care. I don't care what colors, what rocks. This is what I want for the backyard. You tell me what you think would be best. And he did. He was like, honestly, given the color of your house and the size of the space and what you're looking for back here, I think we should use the sandstone in this, and then we'll use the earth blend in this, and that'll create some nice contrast around the edges, and it'll look beautiful. And I even have some pictures of some that look very similar if you want to see them. I look at them, I said, yes, that's it. We could have saved so much time and emotions on my part about feeling completely out of the water as to what I was looking at, what I needed, what was expected, how this would look like. There's a lot of pressure when you're spending that amount of money on rocks to make sure that you don't pick a thing that doesn't suck. And we have the option and the opportunity to help our clients in the same way. So instead of sending me an entire website full of options, we could have any of all of these things, right? Knowing the budget that I had, knowing what I was looking for, knowing a deep understanding of this industry, he was finally able to say, this is what I suggest. Amen. Thank you. Here, take my money. If you suggest it, that's what I want. And I already had told him, like, I don't even have a Pinterest board for this. Like, I'm literally like wide open to what your expertise is. And so the minute he was willing to say, okay, here's me proposing to you what I think is the best solution, and then here's a picture of what that looks like, I was like, sold. Here's my check, right? And we have the opportunity to do that for people in the mobile bar space when they reach out to us. Instead of sending them a plethora of options and price points and services for them to tell us their dream and for us to then propose all at once. Here's what I think will work well for your situation and scenario. It's not one size fits all because you didn't reach out to me with a 2-hour happy hour for your 50 corporate people. You reached out to me for a 4-hour wedding for 150 people, and you want multiple bar locations. So your proposal is going to look different. It's going to feel different. It's going to be curated for your specific needs. I'm going to feel seen. I'm going to feel like you're the expert here. You've thought of everything. And then at that point, it's literally about, I did think that I would potentially want 3 signature cocktails instead of 4, or for me to be like, I actually did want to build a fire pit. And can we do that out of a different stone? Now we're just polishing this proposal. We're not starting from scratch and having to, like, I could have done 3 weeks worth of research in order to just utilize the website of rocks for me to figure out exactly what type of rock and what type of shades would go well with my house. But I didn't have to because I hired an expert. And so let people hire an expert, curate for them based on their requests and their needs. Don't put the onus of understanding what we do on your client.
This again works in hypnotherapy and on toddlers, right? You give them the illusion of choice because we see so many people who get feedback from their brides who want 12 different cocktails at their wedding. And they're like, hey, how would you do this? And we're always like, we wouldn't do 12 craft cocktails for your event. And so instead, your form can say, are you interested in 2, 3, or 4 craft cocktails? And then they're like, oh, I have choice here. But you're not leaving it open ended for them to be like, calling their friends and calling their dad and calling their mother-in-law and being like, what's your favorite drink? What's your favorite drink? Okay, I'll put that on the list. Because first of all, your lines are going to be enormous, right? I mean, you guys know why 12 custom cocktails are not a good idea. And so closing that and giving them options, our beige government does a great job of this as well, right? They give you the illusion of control by giving you options, but your options are controlled. That's what we want to see here.
Exactly that. So far in this little rant about automations, which then kind of leaked into the illusion of control. When we are setting up automations in our business, we definitely want to automate the auto response, and we definitely want to automate follow up after a proposal is sent. That's kind of where it ends for me as to automations. I think proposal needs to be a manual experience. I think I would not auto respond to text messages. I do see that's an option beyond where, in some cases, there are systems that allow you to auto respond if you're out of office. I'm okay with that. If you're out of office and you want to set the expectation of when you'll be next in office, that actually is a great function. But we don't want every single text that comes in at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday to get an autoresponder, because people assume when they're texting that they're texting an individual and they want that intimate experience. That's why they chose to text, first of all. And so we want to give them that opportunity for intimacy. We also encourage people to call whenever possible. I don't necessarily mean that you have to demand a call in order to create a proposal for someone. I feel like that's where people do this incorrectly. They're like, no, I need to be able to talk to somebody in order to create a proposal. No, you don't, because we don't need to propose everything in the kitchen sink straight out the gate. What you need is for them to know baseline, this is what it's going to cost to get this baseline experience with us. And that doesn't require a phone call. You also don't want to put mandatory pressure on someone before they've paid you. They haven't said yes yet. And so for you to be like, you have to get on a call with me in order for me to give you pricing information, especially as a millennial, I'm like, you don't get to demand my time like that. If you don't know how to do what you do enough to give me a proposal before you and I have an actual conversation, then I'm going to go find someone who can give me a quote based on their expertise and what I've already told them. Not everybody, obviously. Some people are going to be like, yeah, sure, let's do that. But you're going to leave money on the table if you insist on doing it that way. So there are better places than others to build intimacy or to encourage engagement. and having it be mandatory before you guys have agreed to like enter into a relationship is not a good idea. So the last thing that I want to talk about today is the place for brochures and the difference between a brochure and a proposal. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit throughout the first and second episode here, but just to like clarify, because I do think that some of the softwares maybe refer to brochures and proposals like interchangeably. In my opinion, a proposal is a customized proposal of services for an individual. A brochure is a catalog of options. I'm not a big believer that the brochure should be interactive. I'm not opposed if you do, but the expectation shouldn't be that you receive a brochure, you pick out your things, and then we move on our merry way. A brochure, in my opinion, is the opportunity for you to show off what you do, who you do it for, how you serve. So a brochure, in my opinion, should have storytelling. It should have imagery. It should have case studies of past clients, not just testimonials, but like so and so came to me or came to us with this problem set. That this was the challenge they had, or this was the request that they had. This is how we solved it. This is the bar that we used. These are the cocktails that we put forth. And this was the result. Again, it's storytelling, but it's taking them on a journey. And potentially the person that's reading the brochure might be like, oh my gosh, I too have this challenge, or I too want this experience. And then using the words and the imagery that you put in the brochure, you can walk the reader through your process of how you solved this and what your options were and the result. A lot of times you can say, we offer this, but you don't necessarily have a good understanding of what does the result look like? How do people feel about it? How were they able to execute that? And so you can use the brochure as an opportunity to show your depth. Maybe this case study was from a wedding. Maybe this one was from a corporate event. Maybe this one was from a festival or a nonprofit event, right? You can show your depth and breadth through storytelling in your brochure. You can, if you want, give examples of some of the offers that you have. So if you do acrylic menus and you have an example picture of like what's possible, if you have fancy garnishes, if you offer the sexy ice and the cubes and the spheres, then you can have those things listed in your brochure as options. But it's not expected that a brochure is the thing that people are taking action on in order to get booked. It's merely almost like an inspiration document. It's an indoctrination document that says, this is available to you. And so it should be utilized to make them fall in love with you and really deepen the intimacy that they have with the relationship they have with your brand. And that's one of the reasons why I think sending the brochure after the automated email might be a great option as well. It could be something that's downloadable straight from your website. It doesn't have pricing. There's no context needed. You don't have to walk people through what this means. It's just an opportunity for them to download something that's like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to see at a deeper level what they do and what my options are here. Whereas a proposal has been custom created and curated for what the client has told the company that they want. This is the date. This is the experience that I'm looking to have. These are the services that are most interesting to me. And this is ultimately the experience that I'm trying to provide my guests. Okay, great. This is what that looks like with us.
I had a question that you somewhat addressed there that I thought our listeners may or may not have, but then it kind of, as you kept talking, clarified. And so correct me if I'm wrong, or like give any clarifying context here, but it seems like we get the question a lot. Should my prices be on my website? And when you're talking about brochure, I was like, should the prices be in the brochure? And you said it shouldn't include pricing. And then it kind of dawned on me because we've migrated to the premium space here. And in the premium space, we are telling our ideal client about their experience through the use of images, storytelling, legacy building. And that's not something, that's a restaurant that doesn't have prices on the menu. Right? I mean, because historically you've told people put like your starting prices on their website. If they're getting a lot of inquiries that are tire kickers or way below their budget, you can put a starting at price. And while that might still be relevant and people want to do that, as you migrate to the premium client or even the ultra premium client, at that level, are we now a restaurant with no prices on the menu?
I don't think we are. I think restaurants with no prices on the menu we're now in the luxury space because now we're just purely experience. I'm going to order a thing. It could cost $1,000 and I don't know, but I'm not supposed to care in this space, right? Like if I was to be like, how much does this cost? I know there's no prices on this menu, but how much does this cost? I'm signaling to everyone around me, I don't really belong here, right? And so we're not quite there yet. But with the brochure, it's a lookbook. It is an opportunity for you to see and to feel and to experience without talking price yet, because it is a bit taboo at this stage because we don't really know it's like asking someone on a date but then also discussing how it's going to go down. Like, are we going Dutch? Are you picking up my tab? Right? It's a little too early in this conversation for me to be. I'm not going to not go on the date with you because you expecting to go Dutch. If it is, that's transactional, not intimacy, right? And so we're not quite at the stage in this relationship where we want to talk about money. It doesn't mean that they couldn't happen very quickly. So I could send you the brochure, you could inquire, and then I could send you the proposal 3 hours later. But that's because we've hit those thresholds where it's like, okay, now we need to talk price in order for us to move on to the next step. But right now we're still in the wooing stage. And now that doesn't mean you couldn't have starting rates, but what we do is so customized in that you'll hear people say, well, I can't really give you a quote because there's so many variables that will determine that. In the brochure, it's too complicated for us to give them rates in the brochure. So we're just going to not talk about it yet, but we certainly could put in the brochure rates are dependent on, like waiting for people to call out the three things that all rates should do: duration, guest count, and services rendered. All of our rates are dependent on duration, guest count, and services rendered. And that's just too much of a conversation to have in a brochure because a brochure should be kind of one size fits all because we're just talking about vibe. We're just talking about general offers that we offer. We're not really talking about what this will cost you. That's the proposal. And so in the brochure, yes, you can have starting rates if you want, but it's not necessary because we're not having the money chat yet. We're literally just talking about fit in the brochure.
Yeah, I love that, and it's available too for you to make that little asterisk that's like rates are dependent upon that. You can also make that sexy, right? Like anywhere you're putting words, remember that you're building legacy, you're building intimacy in your storytelling. So you could say something like, your event is unique and your investment will be just as unique. And that's why we ask for this information, fill out the form here or whatever in your brochure, so that it's not necessarily like, here are your starting rates. And it's also not like unsexy, like guest count, duration. And you can say all those things, but say them in a way that makes me feel, you want to make your client feel superior. Like everybody loves a good superior feeling. Like you want to play on their ego. You want to make them feel like, oh, I'm the very best and my event will be the very best. And you do that by like the storytelling, legacy building verbiage. And that can go absolutely anywhere that you're putting words.
I love that you pointed that out because that is literally one of the biggest differentiators between the premium space and the luxury space. So in the premium space, the power dynamic is that the customer is the person in charge and then power. In the luxury space, it's flipped. In the luxury space, the brand is always in the higher seat of power. And so it doesn't really matter what the customer wants or thinks they need. The luxury brand is the one who's ultimately going to determine what you get as a customer, right? So we very much play in the premium space. We very much want to a certain extent, bow to the needs or cater to the needs of our ideal client and the person that is paying the bills. So we want to make them feel like they are the most important thing that we do, which is why we can't automate everything. If we automate everything, we fail to customize and to create intimacy throughout the entire buying process, then they're going to feel like a number. And that's not premium. That is mass market. That is budget. right? And so if you are playing in those spaces, then automate. You kind of have to. You have to build those economies of scale. But in the premium space, people are going to be wowed by intimacy, and intimacy is created through those unique, personalized touch points.
So elevate your potential clients to the seat of power in the relationship, right? And do that through controlled mechanisms. And so, full circle here, the pre sale process is about elevating the client to that seat of power. And who doesn't love people who make them feel good about themselves? And so, essentially, that's what you're going to do. Everything you do is to make the customer feel good about themselves, in turn, feeling good about your brand. But we do that through controlled mechanisms. So, we don't just want them out here willy nilly 12 cocktails, but we're going to give them enough choices that they still feel like they're maintaining control. And we're going to remind them how amazing they are at every step of the way.
Exactly that. So that wraps up the second episode of all the knowledge that we would love you to come into the Powerful Proposals webinar with. So, just in short, we talked about confidence, communicating value, not cost, making people feel seen, not sold to, integrating social proof into your pre-sale process, future casting and the setting of expectations, people doing business with people and building intimacy, making the ask, we're inviting them to take action, automating in places that are appropriate, not in all the places, and then the difference in experience between brochure and proposal. So the proposal being the place and the space where you're showing people what it'll cost them, what their investment looks like in their experience, and then making the ask of sign the contract, pay, and let's take our relationship to the next level. And so what should be in that proposal? How should it be framed? What are the important psychological components that the levers that we want to play with in that proposal? That's what we were going to talk about in Powerful Proposals. We're going to have a couple examples of what this can look like, and we're going to walk people through the anatomy of a powerful proposal, one that will incentivize and inspire people to take action and to say yes specifically. But I also want to mention that this is a platform agnostic webinar. We do not care what you're using to send proposals currently. This is not going to be use this in Honeybook or use this in Dubsado or use this in 17 Hats. We're going to teach you what the anatomy of a good proposal looks like and how it functions. And whatever it is that you use, I don't care if it's Canva, it could be a Word document. You could PDF it for all I care. We don't care. And so if you're like, well, I would love to attend this, but I use Honeybook, cool. Awesome. We're cool with that too. Now, it may be clunky for you to utilize some platforms. There are some out there that may not have the ability to use imagery. They may not have the ability to add sections to the proposal that you're sending. We can talk about that in the workshop as to like what some options are there. But I do think it's important for everyone to recognize that we're not coming into this with the expectation that you are currently utilizing a piece of software that will accommodate the methodology that we're going to teach. I think just having the knowledge of what a proposal should include and how to present your services in a way that make people sell themselves on it, that's really what we're hoping you get out of it, regardless of the software that you use.
Another insanely valuable episode of the Mobile Bev Pros podcast. Sarah, thanks so much again for having me on. We'll see you guys on the next one.